Put that coffee down.
Act as if.
You be ferocious. You be relentless.
Show me the money.
All right, everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Out Fast podcast. We have everyone's favorite profession in the house. We have an attorney live right here with us. We have Josh Knight from Knight Legal. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started, and all that good stuff about yourself.
Goodness. All right. Well, I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. I moved down to Florida for law school about 15 years ago. Got my start with commercial litigation, corporate law with the St. Joe Company right out of law school. So I was in-house counsel for my first gig, which was a great experience. So I quickly became accustomed to formation and dissolution of businesses, corporate entities. And then I really did everything. I was doing intellectual property registration, monitoring, policing, real estate deals, large land deals. Then after the real estate collapse of 2007, 2008,
Coming here soon.
After that bubble burst, I transitioned over to Deutsche Bank.
Minor downturn in the market.
Final correction.
Minor correction. I transitioned over to Deutsche Bank, and we started doing the subprime, bundling agreements. So kind of contributed to that second burst of the bubble there. But no,
Coming again to you soon.
Right. It was mostly just contract drafting, things like that, agreements, servicing agreements, things like that. Very boring. So then I transitioned over to traditionally a personal injury law firm who was looking to open a business law branch. So I helped them. One of the partners' wives, she had just retired from the PGA Tour, so she and I opened a business law practice, and I helped them create a presence there in the Jacksonville area. So shortly thereafter, I opened my own practice, and then I did that, operated my own law firm for about 3 years before being recruited by another law firm, Albertelli Law, to help them do the same thing, which was open a business law practice. So recently kind of wrapped that up. They focus primarily on real estate and foreclosure law. They represent lenders, creditors. So I've decided to transition away from that and go back out on my own because my true passion lies with helping people start their own businesses and realize their own visions and dreams.
So I know Valerie is in our BNI group and says I think she's going to be working with you with something that maybe she's going through. But sometimes people might think if they're starting a business, they may be a little hesitant and try to go on what's the is it LegalZoom? It's like lawyers, so so it's like God. It's like the Zillow version of
that's right, do it stuff. DIY.
But how can I guess if you describe maybe some of the services like you provide, a lot of people think they might have to pay an arm and a leg to use an attorney if they're trying to form some business. But maybe take us through kind of your process of like maybe your initial consultation and how you work with people, maybe someone that's doing a startup or still 3 years or less in the business but just needs some more things in writing.
Sure. Well, the number one mistake that people make that want to go in and start their own business or entity is they think they can do it themselves on the cheap, but it's so much more costly to bring somebody like myself in on the back end. True. When you haven't properly planned on the front end. It's retaining me for an average of $1,250. I will sit down with you. We will troubleshoot every in and out aspect of the area, that particular area that you're wanting to go into business. Then we'll start with the formation. Very simple. Yes, a lot of people can form their own entity, form their own business, S Corp, C Corp, LLC. But if you don't know which entity best suits your needs and why you want to establish it that way. For instance, I was working with a dentist and his wife over the weekend, and they're going to retain me to form an LLC. Well, single member LLCs are treated, let's say if you were to get sued, the purpose of an LLC is limited liability company. You're trying to limit your liability. You're trying to limit your personal exposure. So common trend in the last 3 or 4 years is courts will pierce the corporate veil of a single member LLC, and they can come after you personally at that point if you haven't set it up properly. And just adding a second or third member to that LLC, even it could be a de minimis share of stock there, but you just operate it like an LLC, then you will be protected. So they had no idea, and they were ready to go in and acquire this dental practice.
Yeah, no small feet.
Right. And,
right.
But what you can also do is you can elect S corp taxation as an LLC, so you're not getting hit twice. So and they had no idea about that either. So it's just
that alone.
Yeah, that alone right there, the savings there,
deal. Right.
Thousands and thousands.
Just paid for yourself tenfold.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's just proper planning on the front end saves you so much money on the back end.
Yeah, one of our mentors, Darren Hardy, he says, you get in life what you plan for.
That's right.
So if you don't plan right on that side, you're going to get sued. I mean, we're in a litigious society, right? And especially in America, you're going to get sued at some point. So if you don't have your ducks in a row, you're asking for it in the future.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
what would you say? What are some of the pitfalls of not doing it right? Besides, please explain more maybe more what the piercing of the corporate veil means. We know what that means, but most people may not understand what that actually entails.
Well, again, okay, so I'll use the example of the LLC. You're creating an umbrella of protection. So that LLC is the assets owned and held by the LLC are what would be exposed in the event of a lawsuit, in the event of any sort of situation like that. So that's your veil. That's your veil of legal protection. So if you're a single member LLC, you're commingling funds, or you're not operating it like a formal LLC, then let's say you do get sued. Let's say that the court finds there's liability. Well, they will pierce that veil of protection offered by the LLC and allow them to come after you personally as if you were had set it up like an S corp or C corp. So.
Gotcha. Do you work with like CPA or other professions that you may need to rely on if someone's starting up and they don't, they want to set up an entity, but then again they've never even used a CPA and they just don't know what they don't know?
Sure, I have several CPAs that I work with. Frank from our BNI group being one. Also, there's a gentleman by the name of Eric Binke with Cantor and Associates. He refers me a lot of business, and we work in unison with each other, taking our clients step by step through those initial steps of forming the business or helping them in any way they can with their endeavor and visualizing their dream. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I know we had Josh do some documents for us, and we had another attorney, and his stuff was so much more concise, and it was just like it was a pleasure to look at because it was like instead of being 40 pages, like we're all about let's do it efficient and like just
Well, there's nothing worse when you're reading some of that legalese, you know what I mean, and you're like, okay, so. How long did it take to phrase that sentence? Therefore, thou, in case of the following, thou, therefore. You're like, bro, could you just have put some bullet points down there, man, and moved along,
I mean, I think a lot of times one of the misconceptions is, okay, you're paying one of these white glove law firms to write a document in what you said, quote unquote, legalese. It doesn't need to be that way. You're only paying them for that extra time and effort and something that you may not even understand, or the people that you're having sign it may not understand themselves. One of the things that one of my law school professors told us is, the better you as an attorney understand the subject matter, the more easily and simply you can convey it on paper. And I find that a lot of times my clients prefer that. Obviously, a potential legal defense is, okay, well, I signed something that I didn't necessarily understand what I was signing at that time. So the more simplified it can be, doesn't mean that it's any less enforceable or offers any less protection. It just, I think it's in the best interest of both parties is if it's more plainly written.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. I mean, there's been so many times where we go to the closing table and you look at if y'all have not looked at what a mortgage says in it and how long and thick it is, it's all legal jargon to protect who? The bank. Has nothing to do with protecting you. So, I mean, the reason they do it is because they want to confuse you. Probably. I'm not going to speak for banks, but I mean, it's
they want you to glaze over. They want you to be like, God, get me to the end of this so I can sign.
Pretty much. I mean, we're doing that tomorrow. I mean, you just did it, last year or so on yourself. But like, even if you're like looking at a hard money lender's loan docs, I mean, they're still 50 pages, 60 pages deep because there's so many things that can go wrong that they've planned for. And so, but they've done it. They've done that upfront work, hired an attorney like yourself to make sure that they've covered their own ass the entire time. So if someone defaults on that mortgage or whatever document, they have a lot of recourse because there's so many things in there.
That's a great point. That when you're retaining an attorney such as myself, you're paying for me to come in there and troubleshoot and come up with worst case scenarios.
Right.
To
The what ifs.
the what ifs, exactly.
Yeah. So we had our real estate investor meeting downtown at the Loft recently, just on Tuesday, and we talked a little bit just briefly about joint ventures. And I put on the slides, like, make sure you're prepared for what happens when things go good, and then what happens when things go bad. Is there maybe one or two things people should think about if they're thinking about going into business with somebody else or starting a business with a business partner? It's maybe something that you've seen from experience.
Great
on
question.
Stuff going sideways. How do you? Because it's hard to know. Like, maybe you both have successful things that you're doing, and then you want to combine them, and then it's a totally different dynamic.
Sure. So what you want to do is, for instance, I go back to the dentist that I was working with over the weekend. They're coming in, they're going to acquire a pre-existing dental practice. So, okay, well, what does that look like? What do their books look like? Is it profitable? What do the debts look like? What do they owe? And if you're establishing a new partnership going forward from a certain date, then okay, well, let's talk about the party that you're purchasing the practice from, assuming all liabilities, all debts up until the point of the effective date of the agreement. A lot of times people don't consider that. So then you're marrying debt instead of profitability out there. And then you want to make sure that there's proper indemnification clauses in the agreement, so that you're protected from any acts of the person that you are partnering with. Let's say they do have an existing entity that operates outside of that partnership or that joint venture. Well, you want to be protected from willful acts or negligent acts, of that party. Right. So,
and that could even be like a separate business, potentially, right? That they have on the side, or that gets pierced, and then
that's right.
They're looking at other things they can do. Yeah.
So how often when someone purchases or merges, I guess you're probably talking more about a merger than an acquisition, because during an acquisition, are you really taking on that person's debt?
Potentially. Oh yeah.
Really?
So I mean, there's
right.
You can purchase debt along with the assets of the business for sure.
Wow. So how many businesses actually do that?
We've just done the brand assets.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
We want the email list, the social
right.
media,
That's what I'm thinking.
the logo, shit like that.
Yeah.
I don't care about your accounts receivable because it's probably nothing.
That's the reason they're selling it, right?
Either. That could stay with you as well. Okay?
Yeah.
But then you sign the agreement, and oh, by the way, we owe $150,000 to all these vendors.
Right.
Yeah. That's what I mean, that's about doing your due diligence, I guess.
Correct.
But like,
What's the due diligence process look like with that? Because with the couple of times I've gone down that path with a few different scenarios, I mean, one was like, okay, it was pretty cut and dry. The other was like, I mean, these guys were like, I mean, it took forever, and they were scouring all sorts of things. And
sure. Well, I mean, it just varies. It depends on the type of the business, how long they've been in business. Typically, what I ask for is the last 3 years of tax returns.
Okay.
Get them to open up their books. So the bookkeeper, whether it's a CPA firm or, for instance, I'm going to refer back to my most recent client, which is the dental practice. It's his wife who's been keeping the books.
Right.
That actually terrifies me.
Of course.
Should.
So,
how quick can we get that? Well, let me see what the wife's doing next week.
Right, exactly.
No.
And really, it's just a thorough review of the profit and loss statements, tax returns, and
it's probably not a bad idea for bringing business broker too,
Sure.
to work in conjunction. That's hopefully there's one involved, but making sure you're analyzing is the business potentially really worth what they're saying it is, and
a lot of the CPAs who I work with can act as a business broker. They can determine and evaluate the business and its profitability, long-term profitability. For instance, again, I'm going to refer back to the dental practice. This guy has been winding down his business for the last 3 years, so he only operates 3 days a week now, and try getting a business loan for that.
Right.
Because you're fresh out of school and you're wanting to acquire a practice, and they're like, well, we don't see the profitability here. So you're gonna have to find independent financing at that point, and then prove to the bank, within 6-12 months the profitability.
Right.
explain
That's
to them,
fun.
have a business plan
Yeah.
in place.
Trust
but-
me on my forecast.
Because
exactly.
at that point, you're really looking to purchase solely goodwill.
Yeah.
Because it's Dennis may have been around for 30 years, but if everybody knows him to only be open for 4 hours a day for 3 days a week, you have a lot to overcome financially.
So I want to talk on something that you just kind of alluded to, but indirectly is branding. Because if he's the dentist and he's the one that has the clientele,
Right.
there is no brand. If he leaves and sells off,
He
his
is the
clients
brand.
necessarily will not come back. So
That's right.
Can you talk to about some like the importance of having a brand?
Sure. So, and that's actually something that I focus on in my practice. Is
Okay.
Starting up a business, you're going to want to focus on incorporating under the name, and then consider trademarking. Trademark the name. If you're going to get a presence on the internet through Facebook, social media, have a website, you're going to want to protect that, because
Sure.
anytime you have a good idea, somebody's going to try and rip it off if it's not protected. And a lot of time in situations like that, really the only thing you have is the goodwill associated with that name. For instance, the dentist, he's been around for 30 years, and in situations like that, obviously you're not going to be looking at an acquisition of the trademark or intellectual property associated with it. It's goodwill. So then you get an employment agreement in place with that purchase and sale agreement. Okay, well, I'm going to hire you as my employee for the next year to 2 years.
Right.
My expectation of you is that you're going to be here on these days, and you're going to continue feeding that community you've been
It's
serving.
almost like helping with the handoff over
Correct.
time. 'Cause
Yeah.
You
Correct.
can't just cold turkey that,
Yeah, it's
and now
almost
you're
like
back to the square one, and you might as well not have bought the business in the first place.
Exactly. So
So
it's a mentorship and a continuing obligation to promote the business.
Yeah, and I've listened to a couple podcasts where they call about a clawback. Like, I don't know if that's the real term, but a clawback clause. So if you have, like property management, you have owners or contracts or whatever, and someone switches within the first 12 years, they leave due to you selling the business, then that starts to come off the purchase price, right? Like,
Yeah.
to build in that clause that if it's that type of business where there's some type of repeat thing going on, and they leave due to that you should get a benefit, or you should, both sides should be
That's got to be
incentivized to
fun
keep
trying
people.
to prove that one way or the other.
Yeah, I actually had that happen when I sold my pool business. We had we had that same exact clause where if they lost X, because it was all based on how many we had service clients, and so if X amount of however many people left by the time 3 months went past, like they held $12,000 in escrow, and some people just in that particular business, like people just don't stay on because there's no real contracts in place. So yeah, it's like having an attorney make sure that was written out properly. The buyer that bought my pool business did this due diligence, because they know in the pool business and other businesses, like people just don't continue with new companies. They move on to something else, or they decide they're going to do it themselves, or whatever the thing was. And it actually ended up costing me $12,000 because there were 10 people that left, which was a value of $12,000. So that sucked.
Yeah.
But again, it was hard to prove one way or the other, because then I had to reopen their books. And I was a motivated seller, like in the real estate business. I was like, I want to get the hell out of this business. I don't care about that $12,000 anymore. I'm out. I'm done. I don't want to touch a pool ever again. So, but yeah, there's stuff like that happens all the time.
Yeah.
But like, again, having the attorney do
It's all
it.
about doing it on the front end, getting the
Bingo.
CPAs involved,
Yep.
doing the valuations, and,
Yep.
and spotting those potential red
So
flags.
here's something fun that we just went through with one of them: valuing social assets, right? Valuing social assets and social brands. And I talked with probably 5 or 10 people about that, and there's really no definitive. Okay, well, here's how. There's no math really behind it. It's all a feel thing. Like branding kind of is, but when you get into some of the digital things,
Yeah,
there's some hard numbers there. You got email.
What's
lists,
what's
you got-
100,000 followers on
Right,
Instagram
exactly.
worth?
Right,
And the only
exactly.
thing I
Yeah.
could come up with for that was, what is it? Well, what will it cost me to recreate that?
Yeah. Or what's it
Okay.
what's it currently generating revenue based on that?
I was about to
if
say,
you can track
But that's
that,
tough too.
The
Yeah.
contact to conversion to actual business.
Because so here's the thing. Let's say somebody's got an email list and they stink at it. And or they haven't been doing anything with it. And you're like, well, let me see what you've been doing with your email lists. And even if they have some cookies set up, and they don't do anything with it, and you're like, well, it only generated $5,000 for you last year.
Yeah.
And they're like, it's 50,000 emails, bro. We just haven't done anything with it.
Yeah.
You know, so like that's tough too.
Yeah. It's like that's
the only thing I could come up with.
It's just like
that was
revenue
fair.
though, but these social media influencers make money somehow. You know, they charge per post, they charge per story. You know, there's only so many ways you can quantify that. But again, maybe you should be the attorney that figures out that evaluation. You become a billionaire because
Right.
how many of these influencers have hundreds of thousands of followers that monetize that? But again, how do you sell that brand? Because they are the brand. So it's one of these things like it's good luck, I guess.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Only if you could tap into their audience and somehow keep the person still doing stuff every once in a while, you know, on a contract maybe, and then you just monetize and their page. Yeah.
I don't even know how
that's challenging.
possible. It is
Yeah, I don't
just
either
challenging.
because if you're, I mean, there are companies out there that are social media influencers. Like you got, again, they're already big companies. So you look at Nike, you look at those people that post on stuff on their Instagram. They're making a ton of money off of that, but they're also hiring these individual influencers to push that new shoe, to push that new T-shirt that they're putting out or whatever. You know, that's going to be one tough, you know, code to crack, I would think.
Yeah.
But you did mention that you have some real estate experience
I do,
for
yeah.
the foreclosure stuff. So talk a little bit about that real quick.
Well, so I started out doing real estate closings as a law clerk, 13, 14 years ago. So I was on the front end of, you know, the real estate transactions, walking purchasers through the closing process. I was helping developers write condo docs, declarations. We would help with the development of PUDs, things like that. Then when I started with the St. Joe company, you know, I got to touch every aspect of the real estate process. You know, from land acquisitions to horizontal, vertical development, licensing, things like that. So it was a pretty natural transition for me to, with Albertelli Law, you know, to assist and facilitate with the foreclosure cases that they handled. You know, Jim Albertelli was able to parlay his relationships with the banks that he had established, doing real estate closings. 2007, 2008 hit. He transitioned over to the foreclosure work, so utilizing those same relationships. My department, my area of specialty was more focused on all the ancillary work, the spin-off work from foreclosures, quiet title actions, defense, second, third mortgages, if there was a lien strip effort and things like that. So I definitely know all the ins and outs of foreclosure work, and the initiation and prosecution of a foreclosure case, but I definitely have more experience with all of the ancillary parts of that. So
Okay. What was
doesn't
what was the
answer.
craziest thing like that you kind of went through with the whole foreclosure process that started happening?
Gosh, you know, the state of Florida has allowed homeowners associations to have very unique powers that you just don't see in any other state in the U.S. And they're probably the most problematic, or at least the most challenging for me to deal with in my experience.
Because of their liens?
Yes, their
Yeah.
lien superiority, their foreclosure rights. You know, they had, gosh, it's amazing to me. They have foreclosure power in the state of Florida, and if you're not careful, they could potentially wipe out your lien. And so dealing with them, fighting with them. In fact, one of my biggest cases involved $40,000. And you know, statute 718, 720, Florida statute allows for banks in a foreclosure situation to pay the HOA either 1% of the value of the mortgage or up to 12 months of the preceding year in HOA dues, and there's a cap. But in order to benefit from that, you have to follow some very stringent rules and in that foreclosure process, you know, in terms of issuance of certificate of title, transfer title, etc. If there's a misstep at any point, then the HOA could potentially come after you for that full amount due. So those are the most aggressive and craziest cases I ever got involved with.
Yeah. Sounds like a headache. Sometimes people ask if we manage HOAs. I'm like, nah, nope.
I wouldn't. Yeah.
Not a chance.
good.
No, you got to get a whole new license for that and all that good stuff. No thanks.
Even
Just-
for real estate investors that are looking at properties or buying at auction and stuff, that's another thing. I mean,
There are so many things you
gotta
got to have
look
do your
for.
homework on
Yeah.
auctions, man. And everybody asks, like,
Yeah.
oh, do you buy at auctions? Like, no. we don't have the we honestly don't have the manpower or the backing to be able to pull that stuff off. There's just so many steps you have to take, and there's other big companies around town that are experts in that. You know, we stick to our, you know, stay in our lane, let them do their thing. So I see so many investors that try and get into the auctions, and they just end up buying bad deals because they don't understand what's all lingering maybe behind it, or they're getting bid up by the people that are the experts, and they're having to pay $5,000 more than they should.
Right.
It's on a soapbox on that.
No, you're right.
Sure.
I mean, you're buying subject to at an auction.
Yeah.
You know, you could potentially pick up a property you think you own free and outright, but then we've got this $100,000 mortgage that's still lingering out there. We've got these tax liens that are still out there that
tax liens are a big one that you
miss.
miss.
Big one.
Yeah. So, what's the best referral that you could get right now for your business?
You know, anybody looking to start up a business or partner with another business who just maybe even feels like they need somebody to step in and do an evaluation, liability evaluation of their business.
Perfect.
That would be great.
Okay. How do they get a hold of you if they want to do that?
So my website is www.knight-legal.com. So it's knight-legal.com. My email address is lawyerjoshnite@gmail.com.
Awesome.
Pretty easy.
Well, that's pretty much going to wrap up our podcast. Do you have any other questions or anything you want to add? No,
man.
I appreciate
Rock
that.
on, man.
Dude,
Dude, thanks for coming in. That was really good stuff.
good,
You know, make sure you guys plan for the future. Plan. So you guys
what is the 7 P's of planning? You know, did the Marines teach you that?
Yeah, there's a bunch.
I don't remember them. All right, guys. Well, again, thanks, Josh, for coming in, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.